In a beautiful segue, it's almost like we planned it, you heard reference there to virtual schools. And schools have been one of the few areas that we've not talked about directly so far today. So I'm extra delighted to welcome Tony to the stage. And Tony has about 15,000 jobs, one of which, and I think the hat you're wearing with us today, is your virtual school head in Stoke-on-Trent. But you do a million other things, don't you?
Many things, but it's really lovely to get the opportunity to add in the school angle here, because I guess that if we get everything else right in a child's life, if we're lucky enough to be able to do that, and school doesn't work, then a lot of other things fall apart. And conversely, if school is working and it's a stable, safe, nurturing place, then other things actually can cope with the challenges of meeting unmet attachment needs and coping with trauma. So for me as a virtual head, I came to Stoke in 2009. We'd had 4 permanent exclusions in 6 months, and we'd got large numbers of children not in any kind of education whatsoever, and we were in intervention, and no disrespect to Serco, but Serco were running children's services, which is an interesting thing to do when you're in that sort of traumatised state. And it was very alarming for me to discover that nobody quite knew what on earth was going on with these children. They just knew it wasn't quite right. We haven't had a permanent exclusion of a child in care since 2009, nor will we while I'm in post, because these are my children. And I have 4 birth children and 940 children in care and care leavers for whom I'm responsible. And my job's easy, because all I need to ask myself is, would this be good enough for my child? Okay, so my children would never get permanently excluded. That's a proxy, I guess, for what it really means to be concerned for the life of a child and the learning that they need to do. So this is what bothers me, and it's an analogy that I sort of looked for in trying to explain the problems we face in a lot of schools. So you have a lovely car, and you take it to the garage, and it's not working very well because it's making a terrible noise as you try and drive it very, very fast down the motorway, trying to reach your goal or your target. I'm sure you can see where this is going, and you get in there and the mechanic says, well, I've only got the one spanner, not read the manual, doesn't fit, you'll have to get a different car. Yeah? And we're not allowed to swear because we're on camera, but you might well have the WTF response. And that bothers me. It bothers me for lots of reasons. Because look at the expression. We did mentalising earlier, didn't we? Look at this, the expression of this guy as he wipes his hands gloriously and metaphorically. It's very hard to get into pose for this picture, by the way. But, you know, look at him wiping his hands of the problem. What on earth is going on in this guy's head? How does he feel as a professional trying to do a good job? He's horrendously poorly equipped, isn't he? He's got a double-ended spanner. One end says rewards, one end says sanctions. That's all his teacher training is equipped him for. Most mechanics know much more about the internal workings of the internal combustion engine than the average teacher does about the brain that they're fiddling around with all day long and trying to get knowledge into. Quite a scary thought, isn't it? Quite a dangerous thing to be doing. My job is very much about talking about risk, just as all of ours is, but also not just risk to children, but risk to professionals, risk of burnout, risk of what on earth we think we're doing with very, very vulnerable, complicated brains if we don't know, you know, what goes on inside. So I'm indebted to this machine for not working. This is a complete meltdown now that I will have. Hang on, I want to go back one. Yeah. So Jeremy Holmes, of course, puts it like this. You walk through a field with a load of sheep in, and a little lamb runs to its mum. And actually if I went inside that mechanic's head, this is what I would see. He's gone to whatever he knows. We've got to punish this child, because if we don't, everything will fall apart. Absolute nonsense. But that's what he's learned to believe. That's pretty awful for the child, pretty awful for the teacher. Yeah? It could be different. So, now the next one. Right. I think there's a challenge, and I think there's a very helpful set of levers we've got. things other than spanners that we could start to use. First of all, we know that there's huge rise in calls to Childline, and we talk about that a lot, and then what we do is we roll out a CAM strategy for every single school in Stoke-on-Trent, where every school has got a counsellor. Every single school in Stoke has got a counsellor. It hasn't, but let's imagine we do that. What an absolute disaster that is. Because let's imagine that that counsellor is Des, yeah? And one of you goes to see her once a week for an hour, a whole hour, and she talks to you and you begin to open up and you begin to feel safe, and then you go back into the classroom where the teacher knows nothing about what's going on in here. This is this little closed session that you've had, and actually when the teacher then tells you off, you explode because you're in a state of openness, your boundaries have gone temporarily, then you get permanently excluded. So it's not good enough to do it like that. In fact, we have to explain to schools that this is their core business, because it's actually what goes on in a good classroom with a good teacher. They are doing co-regulation and attunement. We were just talking before, is this easier to do in secondary schools or primary schools? You can do it in both. I've worked in secondary, I've worked in special, I've worked in a psychiatric unit. You can do this because actually what you have to do it if anybody's going to learn, because learning is about co-regulation, it's about attunement, it's about matching where the child is up to. So it's not a special thing that you do on top for certain children, it's actually what you do with all children. And the lovely thing about this stuff, and what I explain to our schools is, it's core business, so it doesn't cost you more. It's not a big issue, it's just very, very sad that so few teachers know anything about it. NICE wrote a very helpful guideline, thank you very much, NICE, and in it, it says that bit there, right? So actually there's another part of this, which is if you've got a traumatised child in your school and your staff don't know what's going on with that child and they get it wrong, that's like giving the child the wrong medicine. That's not very safe, is it? Got a child with a cough, so I injected them with IV adrenaline because I thought that was a good idea, and they died. You wouldn't do that, would you? No, you wouldn't. I'm sure you wouldn't. Has anybody ever done that, by the way? Now it's feeling a bit... please don't do that. Don't do that. So, but what you do is you make sure your staff understand what's going on with that child. And if you don't, you're not compliant with the NICE guideline. Ofsted, actually, and I did a very bad thing a few years ago because I decided to train as an Ofsted inspector. But actually I thought, I need to understand what's going on with these people who create such fear and anxiety in the system and whose judgments are so catastrophic for so many schools. What I realised was the new framework's very, very helpful. Our inspection tests the school's response to individual needs, how it helps all children to fulfil their potential. Sure, wouldn't it be good enough for... Oh, see, I seem to be clicking through this too fast. And the handbook says the same thing. So I feel that one of the things we could do that will be very, very helpful is we could ensure that all staff are trained, because it's basic stuff. I spoke to the ASCL Inclusion Committee. ASCL is the biggest head teacher union in the country, 18,000 heads. Talked to them about this. One poor man sat there throughout blanking me in that kind of blokish standoff way which blokes do, unfortunately, when they're listening to something they don't want to hear. And he really naffed me off, big style. And at the end I said to this group, I said, has anybody got a child in their school with a peanut allergy? And he went like this. And I thought, that's interesting, because you're an executive head of almost everything, and you just put your hand up as though we were in a classroom. How interesting, you know, pattern-seeking, survival-oriented. You know the answer to this one, don't you? So I said, oh, do tell me about it. I have a peanut allergy. Wow, that's really scary for you. And have you got any other children in your school, apart from you, who has a peanut allergy? So we have 40 children. Do you know where this is going? What have you done about it? We have every single member of staff trained in how to use an EpiPen. What? Every member of staff? He's still walking into it. That's incredible. What a great head teacher you must be. Now we feel safe with each other, you know? We're really kind of a bromance going on here. And then I said, actually, if you look at your school, which is about 1,200 kids, and you just do some basic maths, you're going to have a far higher number of children who are carrying with them unmet attachment needs and trauma. Yeah? How many staff are trained in any of this? And then it all went horrid again, because, of course, he hadn't bothered training anybody. So this is core business, it's doable, and the last bit here, before I get onto a lovely, lovely little trailer, is this, that actually schools have got loads of money. They won't admit it, but they have. You've got children in care, you've got 1,900 quid. You've got children who've been adopted, £1,900. And Ofsted will only love you, and we want to be loved by Ofsted. It's, you know, we really do, if we're using that money appropriately to meet those needs. It's not a big ask, is it? You can get your staff trained for 1,500 quid very easily. Get some good training in, make sure people have some understanding. And when you've done it, and you've raised that anxiety level by pointing out that actually you've got lots of children walking around with trauma, you can also help them to think about some strategies that will make a difference. So this is what this looks like in Stoke in one of our schools that has taken these messages on board. So that was a bog standard primary school in a very tough area of Stoke, trying to address some of the challenges that came through the door every single day of the week. It's a 2-minute clip from a longer film that you can see if you go to the website that you saw just briefly at the end there. And their journey's been amazing, because not only have they come out of all sorts of terrible Ofsted categories, but yesterday they did a teaching and learning review, which they got outstanding for everything. So for them, it's not an either or, it's a both and. It's not, you either teach these kids or you're nice to these kids, but we're not going to do both. Nonsense, they've done both. Yeah? And you can see that what they've done is created a learning, holistic learning culture. And I think we need to explain that this does make a difference. And I'm going to whiz through this because I'm at a Research in Practice conference, and I'm frightened that I will be ripped apart by academics. These are small-scale results and early bits of data. But when we did the NICE guideline, what we discovered was that the data about interventions that work in schools, and I'm not talking about having Des in the corner to counsel every child, I'm talking about holistic interventions, is very, very limited, which is a great shame. So we have to actually win the argument. And we have to win the argument through data as well as through lovely films like that. But it's interesting because what we're beginning to see is patterns where if you do this, it does seem to make things better. And that's another one. Yeah. So what we were seeing was that you get less exclusions, less use of sanctions, and an improved SDQ. Yeah? So teachers become less reliant on those spanners and more reliant on relationships and more confident with them, so they use less sanctions. Thank you, Tess. Is that a much better way to do it, you think? Right, pointing it at my heart could be a bad idea. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much, yeah. So that school's also facing a different way now in its work. And the ARC, which is the thing I want to talk about just for a moment, the ARC is an ambitious project that a group of us virtual heads and others have put together. And what we want to do is create enough good practice examples to support the sector which is working very, very hard to do good things, and have enough data to challenge the less good stuff and make this a clear message to every single head in the country, every Ofsted inspector, that this is core business, and all the amazing work that people in this room do is also doable by and in and with schools. That's it.
Wow. My apologies, I was busy tweeting about you there for Glory.
Yeah.
He's not even on Twitter.
I sensed a bit of tweeting going on, so I ran away.
Thank you very, very much indeed. And for those watching on the live stream, please don't go out and immediately ransack your local schools. They may not have all that money readily available. And it's important, of course, for you to know that we take a restorative approach to all groups, professionals, including inspectors, who absolutely play a vital role in our wider system. Right, we're going to stop streaming at this point, please, Tom.